Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here, and today I have a simple spring scene card to share with you using the colour layering Duckling. So let's get started. This is the colour layering Duckling set. It's such a cute set. You've got the different layers there to build up the Duckling. There's also some grass, some bulrushes and lots of different sentiments and a little butterfly as well. When I work with colour layering stamps, I like to kind of smush out some of the ink that I think I'm going to use first so that I can see if the colour combination is going to work. It is not always possible to exactly see what it's going to look like because I'm not layering them on top of each other, but it does help a little bit just to see which colours I might want to use. So I'm starting off with the bottom layer first, and I'm using Dandelion bold ink, and I'm going to stamp that down onto some Dove white cardstock. So I'm just making sure to ink up my image really well. I am using the cubes today, but they do come in full-size ink pads as well. So I'm just stamping that down in the Misty, and I am going to stamp this twice so that I get a really nice dark impression. So between the different layers, although I don't show it on camera, I do leave each layer to dry just for a couple of minutes. I do find that that helps a little bit to get a really nice crisp impression. So I'm going to go to the stamp packaging here, and I'm going to work out where I need to stamp the next layer. There are only 3 layers for this image, and I do find that they do layer up really quite easily. I'll be honest with you, I'm not the best at these kind of sets. I'm very particular, I have to say, and I think if it's just out by a little bit, I honestly don't think it matters, but I can see it really easily on my own stamping. So what I found with this layer was the easiest way for me to line it up was to line up the beak, and that made it so that it layered up perfectly. So for this layer, I'm going to go in with Tangerine bold ink. I wanted quite a bright duckling for this card. I wanted a quite springy card, kind of quite bright and airy, and so I'm using quite bright colours, but I do think this duckling would look really nice kind of done in, like, if it was a white duckling, I think that would look really cute, and you could do like a really pale yellow, or you could do some kind of greys as the shadows and things like that. I think that would look really nice. So I'm just stamping this Tangerine layer 3 times just so that I get a really nice dark impression. So just pressing down in the Misty there. And then I'm going to go in with the last layer. And I apologise that my stamps are stained. It doesn't affect the quality of the stamps. They stamp actually perfectly well, but I do know, even myself personally, I don't love having stained stamps, but it's also a sign that the photopolymer stamps are really high quality. So for this layer, I thought the easiest would be to line up the eye of the duckling and then kind of just line up the feet then as well. So I'm stamping this layer in Copper Joe ink, and this is a mid-tone shadow ink, and I am going to stamp this a couple of times as well, again so that I get a really nice dark impression. And I do actually stamp it 3 times, and I think that the 3rd time just really kind of brings out that darkness, and I just think that duckling is just absolutely adorable. So next I'm going to go in with the colour layering frame cuts, and I'm going to cut out the duckling. So I added it on top, and although it lines up absolutely perfectly, I was having one of those days where I just wasn't 100% sure if it was going to line up or not. So I'm taking some sand cardstock and I'm going to cut it from that cardstock. And then I'm going to use the negative portion to line it around my image, and that is going to make it so that I know exactly where that frame cut is going to cut. And it's just an easy way, if you're not 100% sure how it's going to cut, you can see it quite easily. So I'm just sticking that layer down with some low tack tape, and then I can pop the die in place, and it kind of just fits in like a puzzle piece. And then I can run that through my die cutting machine, and that's cut out perfectly, and I know exactly where it was going to cut. So I've got that nice white outline around my little duckling. I'm then going to work on the background, and I have a piece of Dove white cardstock cut to 3.5 inches by 4 3/4 inches. I'm just going to use some removable adhesive onto the back of this so that I can stick it down to my grid paper here. That's just so that it doesn't move while I do some ink blending on top. I'm then taking the Clouds and Grass Scenic stencil. This is such a great stencil because you've got lots of different elements on the stencil. You've got grass, you've got clouds, you've got a nice sun, and then also some birds. And what I love is that you've got both the positive and the negative of the clouds and also the grass as well. So you can use it as a stencil, and you can also use it as a mask as well. So I'm going to start off by adding some grass at the bottom of my scene here for my duckling to stand on. I find it easier to do ink blending with the panel being horizontal rather than vertical. So I've just turned that piece just so it's easier for me to ink blend from the right hand side. And I'm going to use some reactive inks to do the ink blending and an ink blending brush. So I'm starting off with the Key Lime Fizz colour, and I'm just removing the excess ink off the brush. I find that that's a really good way to be able to get a nice smooth blend. I am covering over those birds. I mean, realistically, I probably wasn't going to get ink over them, but I am a clumsy crafter, and so I just wanted to cover that up, and I can reuse that memo tape multiple times. So I'm just adding on a layer of that Key Lime Fizz, and then going in with Green Apple Reactive ink, and I'm just going to add a small amount of that to the bottom and the sides of the grass. On camera you can't really see a huge amount of difference, but in real life it does just make a little bit of difference, just to add a little bit more kind of shadow and darkness just to the bottom of that grass. Again, I'm just wiping off the excess ink off of the brush just so that I don't add too much and get any harsh lines. So I can remove that stencil, and I've got the grass there at the bottom. I'm just going to bring in my duckling here just to make sure that it's how I want it to be. I'm then going to add some clouds in the sky. So I'm taking the cloud portion of the Cloud and Grass Scenic stencil. Again, I'm just adhering that down with some memo tape. And I'm going to take Splash Reactive ink. I apologise that I'm off camera with the ink blending tool here, but I'm just removing that excess ink off of the tool. I'm then just going to go in really light motions here to add some ink on top of where that cloud would be. So that's going to kind of create the sky, and then the white portion is going to be the cloud. I have left a gap between the grass and the sky or the clouds. I think it looks okay because the duckling is quite large. It's going to kind of cover most of that up, but often I would add a bit of ink blending just kind of above where that grass is, and you could do that quite easily with this stencil because you've got that mask portion of it as well. But I am just going to add 2 clouds here, again bringing in that duckling so that I can see exactly how far I need the clouds to go up this panel, and then I can just figure out exactly where I wanted the clouds to be, and then I can use that memo tape again just to hold that in place. And for this layer, I want to make sure that I don't add too much ink onto this because I really want it to kind of fade up to white for the rest of the panel. I'm kind of focusing most of my scene towards the bottom of the panel here. It's just a really simple way to create a background for any focal image. So just adding that ink there at the top, and then I can remove all of that memo tape and that stencil. And then my duckling is just going to fit there at the bottom. Like I said, I just think he is so cute. I'm then figuring out which sentiment I want to use from the set. I like to just hover the set above where I'm going to stamp it so that I can see if it's going to fit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp it down onto a piece of plastic or acetate, anything like this. This is actually quilter's plastic, but you could just use a piece of packaging or something like that. And what I like to do is I like to stamp on it so that if I'm not 100% sure of the placement of the sentiment in particular, I want to make sure it's straight, I want to make sure it's in the right place. I've not stamped it directly on my panel and I can move it around. So I'm just going to place that there in the MISTI, and then I'm just going to stamp that down on top of that plastic piece. And I can pick up that plastic and move it around so that I can see if I want the sentiment in a different place. As it turned out, I think it was pretty much okay. So then I can remove that plastic and then I can ink up the sentiment using Intens-ified black ink. So I'm just going to ink that up really well. And this is a really nice dark ink. But I am again going to stamp it twice because I like to stamp really lightly the first time, just in case. I don't want to distort the sentiment or anything like that, and I would much rather stamp twice than stamp once and not be happy with it. So I can just stamp that a second time, and again I'm just pressing really lightly here. I've then added some foam tape onto the back of this panel, and I'm going to adhere it down onto an A2 sized top folding card base. So I can just try my best to get it in the middle of that card base, and then once I'm happy I can press down. I've then added some thin foam squares onto the back of the duckling. I wanted to add it with a bit more dimension, but I didn't want a huge amount of dimension, so that's why I used that thin foam tape. And I'm just going to have that duckling right at the bottom of that panel there, so he looks like he's standing on the grass. Or in the grass, I should say, amongst the grass. So that's a really simple way to create a spring scene using the colour layering duckling. Links to the products that I used will be in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Hero Arts blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.